You know, the best-selling book of all time is the Bible. Continues to be the biggest bestseller. I grew up with the Bible. The Bible remains the first book of all major religions. Judaism, of course, Christianity, and Islam. And the heroes and the personalities of the Bible, Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah. You have Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah and Rachel, characters like Moses and Aaron, but also characters that include Abraham's children, Ishmael and his son Isaac, as well as Isaac's children, Jacob and Esau. These are ancestors of the peoples of our time. So I wanted to address, talking about the spiritual front, that people ask the question, what is this war about in the first place? I'm not talking about the immediate horror we all understand and we're all appalled, and we understand it has to be completely eradicated. But the bigger picture, is it a 75-year war since Israel became a state? Is it a war that goes back 100 years, 200 years? Does it go back thousands of years? And what is it about? When you want to fight a war, you want to know, what do you want? So it could be territorial argument. I believe that you have some of my territory. It could be resources. It could be power. It could be ideology. I think it's critical to understand that this is religious in nature. The Western world does not want to hear that because we think religious wars are a thing of the past, of the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, and we're beyond that. But it's not correct. Religious wars are real. And when what we call terrorism, or some people call radical fundamentalism, or radical Islam, is based on a religious approach, not based on some just territory. Is it just territory? Is it just that state, that land, that Israel, where the Jews live in Israel? That's the battle? Is it about two states? I mean, the partition that the UN suggested in 1948 was two states, but that was also not acceptable. So I want to go back to the biblical roots, especially the story that we read literally these weeks in the Torah, in the Bible. And it's the story about Ishmael and Isaac, the two sons of Abraham, who would become roughly, in general terms, the ancestors, respectively, Isaac, the Jewish people, Ishmael, the Arab Muslim people. Obviously, Islam wasn't born until the 7th century, but the Arab world, that region, called the Middle East, obviously there's been plenty of, we'll call it assimilation, plenty of intermarriage, plenty of, due to the different wars, so many people are not necessarily pure lineage straight from Ishmael, but nevertheless, the overall story. And when you look in the Bible, you actually see a battle going on. So the story goes like this, and you can look it up in your own Bible. I'm giving to you pretty much loose translation of the story. Abraham begins the search for God. He lives in what is today considered to be southeastern Iraq, or Qasdim, where he lived. And and then God appears to him when he's 75 years old and says, time has come for you to begin your journey. Well, he was already journeying, but the physical journey as well, which is a spiritual journey at the same time. A journey that took him northwest, from southeast Iraq approximately, went up northwest to what is today considered modern day the land of Israel, called the land of Canaan at the time. And God says to him, this is the land that I promise you. This is why it's called the promised land. And I promise it to you, and then to your child, and to your children, and to your descendants. So making the story short, Abraham says to God, I have no children. Well, the promise is very nice, but what will happen after I'm gone? So God tells him, look up to the heavens, the stars. Your children will be spread like the stars across the heavens. God talks to him. We discussed this last week, so I'm not going to go through all the details, and gives him a promise, a covenant. Part of that covenant is actually quite frightening to Abraham, because he's shown the challenges that his children will have to go through, the battles they will have to fight, the persecutions they will endure. Shows him all the empires to come, the main empires, the Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, and the Ishmaelite Empire, You can call the Ottoman Empire, you can call it other names, different stages, the Moors, and so on. Abraham is shuddering. But God says to him, by the end, your children will prevail. They may suffer, and they will suffer, but they will prevail. In the words of the Bible, they'll leave Egypt with great wealth, great treasures, which doesn't just mean physical treasure. They will become a great people. And that's what God tells Abraham. The children you will have will become great people. Now, Abraham and Sarah were husband and wife, but Abraham and Sarah could not bear children. So she advises to Abraham and says, why don't you take our maidservant, Hagar, and have a child? And indeed, that's what Abraham does. And the child is called Yishmael, which means because God listened, Yishmael listened to the prayer. Okay, the child is born. Interestingly, the Bible describes this child as being a wild person, without boundaries. His hand will be everywhere, and everyone will be within him. Lack of boundaries, wild. Anyway, at that point, Sarah tells Abraham, even though I had suggested it, but the maidservant is treating me condescendingly, and she wants Abraham to send her away. So he does, but she returns. The story continues afterwards that Abraham circumcises himself and his son Yishmael, and then continues the story that Isaac is born, miraculously. Sarah's an older woman, Abraham's an older woman, Isaac is born. To the point he's called Isaac because the word Yitzchak means laughter. She laughed. She couldn't believe it. Didn't make sense that she would give birth, but she did give birth. And then the story, I'm taking certain select pieces just to continue the narrative, that she sees Yishmael behaving in a way, the Torah calls it merry, but the commentaries explain idolatry, paganism, some say sexually inappropriate. There are different interpretations. But she was corrupting in her mind her son Isaac. So she insists that Abraham send Ishmael away from their home with his mother Hagar. Abraham doesn't want to do so. It's his son. And then God says, listen to your wife. Your son, your heir will be Isaac. But Ishmael is also your son, and he too will be a great nation with multitudes. This is what we're told. So what exactly was going on here? This is both Abraham's children. Abraham was the pioneer of monotheism, pioneer of God, pioneer of civilization. He preached, he taught, he pioneered single-handedly a world of virtue and justice and love and compassion and charity. All the principles that we cherish. Yes, it would take thousands of years for it to become mainstream, where a country like the United States would be established on these principles. But that's just 250 years ago. For millennia, monarchs ruled. Despots ruled. Dictators ruled. Sometimes they were benevolent, but not necessarily. There was no such thing as freedom, free and human rights. Be they all ideas, principles that Abraham pioneered. And he taught it to his children, obviously, Ishmael and Isaac. So what was the conflict about? When you read a little deeper, the story, my friends, is mind-blowing. Abraham represented kindness, chesed, which is the antithesis to selfishness. It's just self-interest. The self-interest is what destroys us. It begins very innocuous. I'm interested in my own survival. But it ends up becoming survival of the fittest. Dog eats dog. Now, in the name of cooperation, we will create, in Freudian terms, an ego, superego will balance the untamed id, because we need to coexist. So we need red lights and green lights. But fundamentally, we are narcissists. Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene. The gene itself is selfish. Abraham disputed all that. No. He said no to the pagan world. There's higher purpose. There's destiny. Thomas Cahill, in his great book, The Gift of the Jews, writes about the 30 key words that the Jewish people, beginning with Abraham, introduced. Destiny, purpose, transcendence, justice, charity. Yes, self-interest we all are driven by it, but we have another part of us that's transcendent in nature, that's selfless and giving. And that's what he embraced and said, I will teach this to my children and to my family. And Isaac, of course, embodied that. But Yishmael also learned that message. So what was the problem? So the Torah tells us he was a wild man. What does that mean, a wild man? It means that he took the chesed, the kindness of Abraham, but it was not properly disciplined. You can kill people with kindness. Water is kind. But if it pours down in flood, it'll flood your field and destroy your field. Water has to be tempered. Raindrops that are absorbed in the ground. So Abraham's chesed came from deep humility. But his son Yishmael, was a very devout person. He prayed and he was kind, but his kindness had a certain element of self, of arrogance. And it was not properly tempered. So it was wild. He imposed upon others. Aggression. Kindness can be very aggressive if you don't have the proper boundaries. Yitzchak embodied the boundaries, and Sarah, as a sensitive mother, sensed that. Remember, she had told Abraham, have this child called Yishmael. It wasn't her being insensitive to him and being jealous or saying, I want to protect my child over him. She realized that if he stays in the home, it won't be good for Isaac, it won't be good for the world, it won't be good for Yishmael. So she says, send him away to his journey to find his discipline. And the end of the story, by the way, later, he actually returns, and it says he did tshuva because of Sarah. Abraham, in his kindness, felt maybe we can still figure it out. So sometimes banishing someone does not mean a bad thing. It means they have to find their way, and they need to go through their growing pains to become more disciplined. That's the true story. So really the battle, the real war, ultimately, is making peace between God and existence and this world. You'll look through history of religion. You'll find, long before the Muslims, the Christians terrorized the world in the name of religion. Because when you are passionate about God and you see people who are not godly, behaving decadently, not living up to God's law, your first initial reaction is we have to destroy them. We have to impose it upon them for their own good. We have to destroy their evil. But that's not the way Abraham taught. That's not the way. The way is through kindness, through compassion, through inspiration, not through destruction. So religion can be a terrible weapon if it's weaponized because it's in the name of God. It's a holy war, a jihad. And that's exactly what the battle was. The roots of the battle were that. Isaac was a man of peace, no aggression at all. And Jacob, of course, continued that same path. Were there warriors in the Bible? Yes, but warriors were never considered to be the top heroes. As a matter of fact, when King David, though he fought just wars, God said, no, you cannot build my holy temple because you have blood on your hands, even if it was necessary, self-defense or whatever the reasons were. The Torah is a path of peace. It says, my ways are pleasant ways and peaceful ways. The entire Bible, it says, the Torah was given only to bring peace into this world. Sometimes you have to fight a battle, but you don't become a warrior. We'll talk about Esav later, the warrior. But Yishmael was aggressive, para Adam. And it took time for him to learn. So it's not surprising that the religions go through growing pains and reality checks. And at some point, Christianity was tamed. The United States is a good example. It's not a perfect country, but its principles that all men are created equal, all people are created equal, endowed by God, by the Creator with inalienable rights, the basis of any healthy civilization. These are Abrahamic principles. And the Jewish people were the journeyers through history that brought this message from Abraham. But Ishmael is also a son of Abraham and is also blessed. But you need to learn. You can fight in the name of Allah, Allah Akbar, and God, but it has to be through inspiring, not through killing. No matter, even if you find people who are infidels and decadent. So one of the fathers of Muslim fundamentalism, Sayyid Qutb, Qutb, he advocated that, violence, because Islam is now the chosen people, and the Jews and Christians fell out of God's favor. That's why we need to control Israel. This is not a war over land per se. It's a war over who controls the land. And it has to be Islam. Look at the constitution of Hamas, and you'll see everything I'm saying. But it's still with a mistake that it's through aggression, through violence, and not tempered properly with the proper humility. That's not about you. You cannot be the one that represents God and says, I will kill God's other children because I think I'm right. So the end story, my friends, will be one of peace. And that's what we're fighting for.